Hello, everyone. Welcome to our course. I'm so sorry to not be with you. I'm sitting in San Francisco, where I'm working with the Archdiocese this week. I look forward to meeting you all in person next week. I wanted to give an introductory lecture to the course, especially because we have to miss a whole week of class because we also have off on Monday to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But I wanted to introduce you to the class and what we're doing, as well as the syllabus, and at least to do it from a bit afar. So the title of our course is Performing Beauty, Liturgy, Theology, and Aesthetics. And we'll dive into what that term means in a bit. But I wanted to sort of challenge us as we start our semester together to think about what we're doing as theologians. I recently, actually on the way from South Bend to San Francisco, was able to read this book that I'd wanted to read for quite some time, Jacques Maritain The Education of Man. And at the time, he offers an articulation of the role of theology in an undergraduate institution, something that actually very few people had done before. He writes in Why a Theological Education, as to theology, it is not to form a future priest or minister that it has to be taught in a Christian college. It is to equip the layman or laywoman's reason in such a way that he or she will grasp the content of faith in a deeper and more articulate manner, and use the light and wisdom of a supremely unified discipline to solve the problems with which a Christian is confronted in the accomplishment of his mission in temporal society. This training should be especially concerned with the problems raised by contemporary science, by the great social movements and conflicts of our age, and by anthropology, comparative religion, and the philosophy of culture. I think in some ways the class that we're about to enter into meets the very definition and understanding of theology that Maritain has. We're not taking in this course, this is not a course in liturgy, how to do the liturgy. It's not even necessarily a course in how to make sure to plan a liturgy well. These are things that are important. But rather it's a cultural course, a course to ask, what makes liturgy beautiful? What is the role of beauty in the Christian life as a whole? What does it mean to contemplate beauty? What do we become when we contemplate this beauty? Not just abstractly in the halls of a museum, but in the concrete act of worshiping God. So I want us to think about this task ahead of us in this manner. A couple things as we jump in. I'm going to go over the syllabus in a moment. But this is my Twitter handle, Timothy P. O'Malley, and we have a hashtag for the class. I mean, how cool of a class when you have a hashtag. So it's hashtag performing beauty. So anything you read that you like, any image you find, a music you want to share with me, just sort of at me. I think that can be used in an angry way too, but don't angry at me, pleasantly at me, at Timothy P. O'Malley, and then hashtag performing beauty so that the whole world can see our work. But let's go over the syllabus. So here is the syllabus, and I will look at it now here with you all. Our course is called Performing Beauty, Liturgy, Theology, and Aesthetics. It is spring 2019, so welcome to spring. Of course, it's South Bend. We meet Monday, Wednesday from 12:30 to 1:45, which is shocking because we're not meeting for the first two classes, and we'll be in DeBartolo Hall 201. I have my office hours listed as well as a course description, but I want to go over some of the objectives, required texts, and assignments. I want to become familiar with major thinkers in philosophy and theological sort of studies relative to aesthetics. So what is aesthetics? Aesthetics is the discipline of perceiving that which is beautiful. It's an act of perception. It's the construction of beauty, but it's also perception using our eyes or the fullness of our senses. And then I also want us to know major works of art used in the liturgy. So we're going to do both. You're going to get a chance to read philosophers and theologians, cultural analysts, and then I'll lecture on them as well. We're going to sort of focus mainly around the work of someone like Hans Urs von Balthasar, but we will do Jacques Maritain, and we'll do others along the way. But I also want something more than this. I want you to practice contemplating and assessing beauty in Christian liturgical art. It's okay to look. It's okay to see. I feel like we spend so little time in our lives seeing, contemplating. This is the art of life. This is the art of what it means to be human, is to see, to perceive the entirety of the whole. But it's also to make judgments. What is beauty? Is this beautiful or isn't it beautiful? What makes it beautiful? So it's going to be okay to argue about this, to think about this. And then lastly, to develop a capacity for research appropriate to an upper level undergraduate or master's level course. That will be self-explanatory in a moment. Here are your texts. You have Hans Urs von Balthasar's The Glory of the Lord, A Theological Aesthetics, Volume 1. There are 7 volumes, so you can thank me that we're only reading one of the volumes, especially when the other volume, the first volume, is actually rather large. And this will be a sort of core text for us, especially in the beginning part of the semester. Jeremy Begbie's Theology, Music, and Time. Richard Kiekhaefer's Theology in Stone, Church Architecture from Byzantium to Berkeley. Jacques Maritain Art and Scholasticism. And Joseph Ratzinger's The Spirit of the Liturgy. We'll read all of these texts. And let me know via email, tomalley@nd.edu, if you can't find them for some reason at the bookstore. Assignments. Listen, there's a lot of reading in this course, and this is because I'm interested in the subject, and I invite you to be interested as well. It's college, and so the reading is intense, the work is intense. But I am telling you that we're doing this reading as an occasion to show you the full scope of what we're doing within a particular class. It's my job as the professor to engage you in thinking through the reading and working with the material. That's my most deep concern for you. I don't want the class to take over your life, but for me, it is actually taking over my life for the semester. So I understand who you are and who I am. And so we'll have some exams to help determine what we've read, what we've thought about, what we're working through. So we'll have a take-home exam that will be due by noon on March 8th, 2019. That's right before spring break. We'll also have a final exam that will be at noon on May 10th, 2019. And these will all be uploaded to Sakai. You'll also have a 10 to 12 page research paper on a specific piece of liturgical art that you have an option to choose. And so how this will unfold is this. You want to meet with the professor before midterm break to discuss how some of the themes and what kind of art you're interested in. Is it music? Is it beauty? Is there something else that you want to do? Then you'll submit an outline of the paper by April 1st. It will include a thesis, an outline of what you'll cover, as well as a bibliography. And then the final paper will be due on Sakai by May 3rd, 2019, towards the end of the term. Lastly, if you're going to contemplate art and think about art, I want a catalog of 20 works of liturgical art with an accompanying paragraph for each one, according to what we've read in the course. So, in other words, assessing it. What makes this piece of art sacred or liturgical art beautiful? What makes it beautiful? Assess its beauty. And so I want you to be able to argue for that with 20 pieces of liturgical art. That's up to you. Here's our schedule. We'll begin with Joseph Pieper in just a moment. Then, although class is canceled, we will have reading and a basic lecture available online for Jacques Maritain's Art and Scholasticism. Then we're going to spend a long time on Hans Urs von Balthasar. We will spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 courses on this. And so the reading is intense, but I'm going to sort of be your guide. And here we'll introduce ourselves to a number of the theological and philosophical themes we need for this work. Then we'll do Joseph Ratzinger's The Spirit of the Liturgy. We'll do that over the course of actually 4 classes. And then we'll wrap up the first part of the semester by looking at Kiekhaefer's Theology in Stone, where we'll think about, well, what is architecture and what makes liturgical architecture a kind of mediation of theological beauty. After the midterm break, we'll do Jeremy Begbie's Theology, Music, and Time. A good deal of this will be led by Carolyn Pirtle. But the goal, of course, will be to say, well, what makes something beautiful is music. And then we want to sort of enter into some case studies of particular moments of beauty. And we're going to focus a lot on the medieval era. And the reason we're doing so is because it's the most mocked era in theology. It's the most rejected era in theology, and especially in liturgical studies. So what we want to do is look at, well, actually, is there something beautiful about medieval art and architecture that we need to attend to music, to nativity plays or the sort of Corpus Christi. And so we're going to work through some material. We'll start with maybe the key work for medieval theology around beauty, Pseudo-Dionysius's ecclesiastical hierarchy. Now, of course, we'll locate him in his full context. And then we're going to do liturgical hymnody of Romanus the Melodist and Adam of St. Victor. Romanus is a Byzantine, and Adam of St. Victor, Latin. And so we want to look at art and poetry as this moves along. Now, you'll notice the amount of reading really slows down in this part of the course. The goal is to really get you a chance to contemplate these beautiful arts. And then we'll also look at Hildegard of Bingen, her homilies 20 and 21, as well as her Symphonia. And then we're going to look at the York Mystery Cycles. This is the cycles for the Feast of Corpus Christi, trying to figure out what is going on with liturgical drama. What does it do? Where does it come from? And actually, how does it shape the liturgy itself? We'll look at the altarpiece. What is an altarpiece, and what role does it have in the act of worship? Stained glass windows. What's stained glass, and what does it do? Liturgical vestments. And we'll look at a reading by Eric Peterson, A Theology of Dress. Then we'll actually celebrate Easter, which is great. So it's important in a course on liturgy to celebrate a liturgy. What about the frescoes of Fra Angelico? Here we move a little after the medieval era, but into early Renaissance. We'll look at devotional poetry in the liturgy. Here we're in early modernity, and we'll look at George Herbert and Southwell. And lastly, we'll conclude with a section on William Byrd's Gradualia, and you can just listen to the album. And so we'll look at those for Corpus Christi. And so the second part of the course will have less reading, but it will have an opportunity to sort of engage intensely in the perception of that which is beautiful. For every one of these, we'll in class look at something, touch something, think about something, and of course, hopefully encourage you to sort of take advantage of some of the dimensions of those sort of liturgical arts on campus. If you have any questions about the syllabus, you can send them along to me via email. I'll be in San Francisco, willing to answer them at any moment. Now, let us return to what I would say is our first reading, which is, what does liturgy, theology, and aesthetics have to do with one another? And there's a kind of temptation, I think, to just say, well, of course they have something to do with each other. Liturgy involves theology, and it involves acts of beauty. But if that's their full connection, then that's not actually much of a statement. And so we're going to look at a bit of a work which we read most of, in fact, a sort of essay by the German philosopher, and although he calls himself not a theologian, he has theological sort of movement, theological instincts of his In Tune with the World, A Theory of Festivity. I want to think about contemplation and the festive. What makes something festive? Is it just that it's apart from something? That it's revelry? I mean, in some ways, Mardi Gras is revelry, a Notre Dame football game is revelry, but does it actually correspond to the full definition of what constitutes festivity? For Pieper, no. He writes, the concept of festivity is inconceivable without an element of contemplation. Contemplation is essential for what it means to be human in Pieper. Contemplation is not just a religious phenomenon, as in a religious contemplative who, thinks all day about God. Contemplation is beholding, the art of seeing. And seeing, of course, here is a stand-in for hearing, tasting, touching, perceiving. So, the really festive is that which is involved to contemplation, a seeing of the whole of life for what it is. An escape, in essence, not escape, wrong word, a bracketing of the workaday world so that we could see the world for what it is. This does not mean exerting the argumentative intellect, but the simple intuition of reason. So here he's making a distinction. In medieval philosophy, there would be sort of two understandings of reason. Ratio, which would be that sort of argumentative intellect. It's thinking, it's the work of distinguishing. And then there was another understanding of reason, which was intellectus, this contemplative understanding in which the whole could be perceived. So Festivity isn't simply about reasoning, right? It's not to take a festival, an event that's set apart, that involves a performance of our whole bodies in a ritual action, but instead it's an act of reasoning, but contemplatively reasoning, looking at the whole, not the unrest of thought, but the mind's eye resting on whatever manifests itself, a relaxing of the strenuous fixation of the eye on the given frame of reference. The field of vision widens, concern for success or failure of an act falls away, and the soul turns to its infinite object. It becomes aware of the illimitable horizon of reality as a whole. That reality is not limited simply to thinking, but a wholeness that is part of contemplation. Think about when you read a poem. In some ways, what does your mind do? It's attending to the words. It's attending to the text. But it's doing more than this. For when we look at the whole, we perceive life differently through the contemplation of the text. It is contemplation, as we'll see, that unite together liturgy, theology, and aesthetics. So you can think about this course that we're entering into as a course on the art of contemplation. And for Pieper, liturgy, Christian liturgy, is the festival par excellence. Because the festival has to have a past that's worth remembering. That's something, an event that's worth celebrating. Later in the text, he mocks, in essence, those festivals that were created, whether you're talking about comps, festivals that he created out of a sort of a sense of positivism, that France would celebrate these new festivals of an atheist humanism, or even contemporary patriotic festivals, which are not really grounded in something, but the government simply tells you to celebrate it. Think about something like Labor Day. Is Labor Day a true festival in the sense of allowing us to see the whole, or is it really an occasion to sell mattresses? So liturgy, Christian liturgy, is the liturgy par excellence. Strictly speaking, the past cannot be celebrated festively unless the celebrant community, and it is the whole community, it's needed for Pieper, still draws glory and exaltation from the past, not merely as reflected history, but by virtue of a historical reality still operative in the present. That liturgy is a festival looks at the whole, it sets apart, because the whole still has an influence on present Christian life. It still has an influence on the world today. Christmas is not just remembering something that took place in the past, but it makes sense, it orients, and forms our present. In this sense, for Pieper, liturgy is that last festival that makes sense for the modern person. Because Christian liturgy remembers a past that takes place, that unfolds in the moment. But it also has a theological quality to it. It's not just a series of signs in which we sort of leave behind the present to some sort of ephemeral future. Rather, it is God acting through the festival, through the creation of a space apart from the rest, a sacred space whereby the human person can participate in this memory of what has come. The Christian Eucharistia manifests that in all acts of public worship, something else occurs besides the praise or sacrifice performed by human beings. It's not quite accurate to say that this something else simply occurs. But at any rate, that occurrence is always what public worship aims and hopes for. In practicing the rites of worship, men and women hope that they will be vouchsafed a share in the superabundance of life. They will receive entrance into divine life, participating in God. And here we have a true sense of what theology is. It's not simply the science of argumentation. Rather, theology is contemplation. So, in liturgy, we perform a supremely theological task, that we allow God to act, a theological task, where God's logic informs our own, rather than the other way around. God acts in these festivals. So liturgy is not the performance, we cannot understand the title of the course, Performing Beauty, as liturgy is simply our particular performance. It's God's performance. It's God performing in our midst, performing beautifully, I should say. And to do so requires sensible signs, materiality. I want you to think about the aesthetic, perception, and the science, as we'll see, of the beautiful as that place where liturgy and theology meet. In this image of the Eisenheim altar piece, which we'll talk more about over the course of this semester, what we have is a festive work. I'm sitting here in Hotel Kabuki in San Francisco, and there's art behind me. It's intended, in essence, to set me apart, to enter me into a space that looks akin to sort of, I'm in Japantown, so a hotel that has a kind of Japanese theme, but to sort of set it apart architecturally with the design of the space. Well, this image sets a space apart. It sets an altar apart. As we'll see, it describes what the altar is. But it also is a performance of this. It's that material element through which we celebrate the act of worship. It's mediated materially. Think about how many times perhaps you've been to the Basilica of the Sacred Heart in your life. Where do you actually sort of celebrate there? What is the experience of liturgy? Is it not mediated through this stuff, this matter? Well, for Pieper, the aesthetic really has a role in the sort of festive liturgy and theology. Excuse me. It should be clear that the invisible aspect of festivity, the praise of the world which lies at festival's innermost core, can attain a physical form. In fact, it must. It's how that which is most wonderful, that which is most splendid, is manifest to us. Can be made perceptible to the senses only through the medium of the arts. The arts, in essence, are the most festive thing that we can imagine. It's that which is set apart, that which celebrates and gives us a glimpse of the whole, and it requires us to behold it. The effect of festivity, the stepping out of time and the refreshment that penetrates to the depths of the soul, reaches the celebrant in the form of a message couched in the language of the arts. It's the arts where we discover a memory, a way of participating in a memory, but of God at the same time acting through those arts. So I want us to think about the aesthetic not just as the sort of, as a Jesuit colleague of mine has said, as the sprinkles on top of the liturgy, but the aesthetic is the essence of how liturgy works. For liturgy works through perception, through our perception of that which is beautiful, of the beautiful God who comes to sort of transform the human condition. Okay, so there'll be a lot more to do in this course and a lot more to sort of read around Pieper. I'm going to give you a quick assignment that I'd love to have complete. Well, I will require to have completed by next Monday, which is simply on Sakai answer this question. What do you hope to get out of the course? That's it. So it's going to be in Sakai, it will just have, you can answer it within the sort of Sakai sort of assignment itself. You don't need to upload a document. Just want to, what you hope. Are there artworks you want to look at? What artworks do you want to look at? Okay, so answer that question. And then I want to sort of let you know that our next reading will be on Jacques Martin's Art and Scholasticism. I'll have the lecture available no later than this weekend. In fact, probably sooner because I'm sitting alone in a hotel in San Francisco. And so we'll work together on this material, and I hope to sort of introduce us to some of the grammar of what Maritain means in this work. Okay, friends, I hope to see you soon in the flesh to perform beauty together with one another. But until then, have a great beginning of the semester, and please pray for me as I'm doing workout, sort of teaching in the Archdiocese of San Francisco this week. So see you soon, and go Irish.